Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about how the violation of individual rights of private business owners, private people who own businesses, causes many corporations, many companies to ship their jobs overseas, millions of jobs overseas. And of course you've heard Trump complain about this recently, going after Ford and others for shipping their jobs overseas. And this has been a common complaint in the media, by the leftist media, by Trump, other Republicans, and by Democrats. The irony in this is that the real reason that the main reason that companies ship their jobs overseas is because of regulations, government regulations, and government taxes, greatly raising the costs of business in the United States, so that these businesses have no choice in many instances but to basically pan out their operations and some of their personnel overseas where there's cheaper labor, instead of being able to keep them in the country because they have got a free enterprise in which they can channel their money into technology and other innovations. So right now, the Competitive Enterprise Institute came out with something 4 years ago, a report 4 years ago, that said that it reported that government regulations entailed more than 80,000 pages of regulations against businesses, and it cost the businesses $1.8 trillion. And of course, as you may know, businesses don't eventually absorb those costs. They have to pass those costs on to other people, which means you and me, via the products and their services. So for instance, there's regulations, but there's a gas tax that can range anywhere from 20 cents to $1.50 around the country. The big oil companies don't pay that tax. They initially pay that tax, but the tax eventually gets paid by you and me. That cost gets passed on to you and me. If you've looked at your phone bills, utility bills, and internet bills and other bills like that, you'll see the cost of regulations by government on there. It can range anywhere from $2, $6, $10, $15, whatever. But all of those regulatory costs get passed on to us. But there's also hidden costs. There's the cost of actually complying with this intrusion into individual rights of these property owners, these businesses. And as I discussed in my initial video on this site, an individual right is the right of a human being, a rational, free will, volitional, free will human being, to his or her only, their body, their property, and their money. This doesn't change when you own a business. Owning a business is your property. So the government likes to say that it's public property because you're selling to the public. But it uses that terminology so that it can intrude on businesses. If you want to, or your teens or preteens want to open up a lemonade stand by the street, the government can come in and say, no, you can't do that. You have to get a health certificate, food handling certificate, or whatever, a license to open up a lemonade stand. Well, that's absurd. I mean, if I want to drive down the road and take my chances on the cleanliness and the quality of lemonade from a couple of girls selling lemonade on the side of the road, that's my business. It's not the government's business. And the same goes if you want to start a small sewing shop inside your house, knitting shop, or a computer business, or a fashion business in your home, or you want to branch out and start a small business somewhere down the street or somewhere in the city, or you eventually have a great idea and turn it into a multi-million or multi-billion-dollar corporation that sells cell phones or fuel or whatever it is you want to sell, tires, cars. What it really comes down to is that that's your business. It's a private business. So expanding into business does not obviate individual rights. It does not get rid of individual rights. But the government makes that presumption, and it usually makes that presumption under the rubric of protection of you and me. But frankly, we don't need protection from capitalism, from free enterprise, from people running businesses. They have a selfish interest to make sure that they take care of us. The interesting thing about capitalism is it's actually quite good for everybody. The companies like Chick-fil-A and Apple and the small sewing shop around the corner, they have a selfish interest to make sure that you and I get taken care of, that we keep buying their products, keep buying their services. And of course, if they have shareholders, they have a selfish interest to make sure that their shareholders are happy. In the news recently, there were a couple of Boeing 737s that crashed. And they had not had problems before openly, but these crashes by Boeing has reduced Boeing's value by $40 billion in the stock market. This is a huge hit to Boeing and its shareholders. And so it's now scrambling to take care of this, to fix this problem, to make sure this doesn't happen anymore, to where people don't die, to where people want to use airlines that use Boeing jets. Boeing has a selfish interest to fix this, to take care of the problem. And by the way, those two jets crashed while under regulatory control. The regulators didn't stop that from happening. Regulations don't work. All regulations do is create giant government bureaucracies. Bureaucrats have no reason to make sure you and I are safe. They have a job to do, and it's a peremptory job. They go in, they can cuss at businesses, whether they do or not. I'm sure they do sometimes. But they can go in and try to control businesses or threaten businesses with punishment or fines or even going out of business. But these jobs are secure bureaucratic jobs. They don't have a selfish interest like capitalistic companies to make sure that you and I are taken care of in the proper way. So Amazon.com, for instance, I've been using them for, I guess, 20 years now. I had no guarantee when I first used them, gave them my credit card information, that the credit card information would be secure, that I would get my product in the 2 days that I paid for, that the product would come through in good shape. But it seemed, a couple of friends of mine had said they'd used it, everything was fine. And so I did, and of course it was, and I've used Amazon hundreds, maybe even thousands of times by now. I have stock ownership in Amazon, which I love. I love Jeff Bezos. I love the whole idea. But the point of that is we're all adults, as adult citizens of the United States. We can make a decision ourselves on whether a product or a company is safe, or whether it's good, whether the products are good, whether we want to put our money into it, whether we want to trust them with our credit card information. A lot of times when I'm going about, especially if I'm traveling, frankly, I don't give some gas stations out in the country and other small places my credit card information. I pay with cash because I don't feel the security there. I don't need regulators to tell me that I shouldn't do that. I don't need regulators to regulate these small mom and pop operations. I can make those decisions myself. We don't need bureaucrats. We don't need regulations. We don't need regulators. We don't need the government setting all of these regulatory standards for anything, for the quality of food in grocery stores or anything else. We can decide ourselves. And when the government gets out of the way, organizations, private organizations like Consumer Reports and other high-quality private sort of overseeing companies come into the private marketplace, and they test out the products and services and quality of these companies. Consumer Reports is amazing. They test, as you know, virtually everything. It seems like vacuum cleaners, phones, TV sets, washing machines, dryers, lawnmowers, everything. I mean, and they come in and they put out very good, high quality reports. In fact, it's so good that these big companies, small companies that make these products, they really monitor Consumer Reports to see how their products are rated. And if Consumer Reports ever makes a mistake on something, which they do, it's rare, but they have before, then the marketplace comes back at them. These companies come back at them and say, no, you didn't do this right or whatever. This happened recently, a couple of years ago, with Consumer Reports. And so what they did is they went back in and they reevaluated, and they came out and said, okay, we do change our report a little bit here and there, and we find that we made a few mistakes, and so here's the corrected version. That's how the marketplace is supposed to work. That's how capitalism is supposed to work. And frankly, there are people who are private citizens who will buy something right off or use something right off. A lot of times they don't even check it out too much. They'll just go in. They're sort of the standard bearers, the people, the pioneers who'll go in and check stuff out. Well, they get the word out to everybody else on how good something is. This is how it works, especially in the internet age. With Netflix, with even new companies coming in with new products, you've got these sort of standard bearers, these pioneers going out and checking things out for the rest of us so that we don't, have to take a risk. And this includes doctors, hospitals, everything else, healthcare. You've got people out there who, like I say, this doctor does this thing great, this doctor's always late. So the private marketplace takes care of all of this. We don't need the government getting involved in healthcare, in sanitation, or anything else. If a wastewater treatment plant nearby, no government regulations, theoretically, wastewater treatment plant starts dumping things into a river or a stream or starts polluting nearby properties or starts throwing way too much stuff into the air, well, then we have already something in place that protects us who are nearby. And that is lawyers and private property, our private property. We can go in and say, we're getting polluted and we're going to get a lawyer. We're going to go after them potentially for millions in punitive damages. Lawyers love this. I mean, if you've seen these, the injury lawyers who come on and say, if you've been in a car crash and, your neck hurts, we can take care of you and we'll go after the insurance company, da, 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 da. They don't say it quite like that. They're a little bit more subtle about what they say. Then they can actually, some of them are not entirely ethical possibly, but the fact is they do provide a capitalistic service in a free society. And the same thing will go when we get rid of these regulations, these individual rights violating regulations that cost $1.8 trillion a year in the marketplace. It's passed on to you and me in higher product prices. When we get rid of that, until politicians, the U.S. government and other governments around the country, you can no longer do that. You have to get rid of all regulations. You have to get rid of all government oversight. When that happens, well, then our private property rights and attorneys who will help us with that, if necessary, come in and take care of all of that. Now, let me just kind of go over this whole individual rights and property rights and how it extends to business. Business is just a concept that refers to the negotiation between two separate parties of product and services, product and or services. Somebody going in and saying, I'm going to have this product or service, I'm going to create it, and I'm going to sell it to other people, whether it's oranges in an orange grove, vegetables that you have in your garden. You want to sell it to everybody sell them to everybody in the neighborhood, or phones, complex phones, and you want to sell those around the world. And that's what business is. All it is the extension of your own private property, of your house, your car, your belongings, and it's the extension of your action from your body to something that is extended to business. That's all it is. It's not something, it doesn't automatically mean that the government can come in and say, oh, you're gonna have a business and try to sell things to other people. Well, we need to have a look-see on that and make sure other people are taken care of. That's not what government's really about. That's not why they're doing it. They're doing it to control people under the rubric of protection. We don't need that protection. We're adults, and we can handle all of that ourselves. But the individual rights are absolute, and so they do extend to business. So the right to one's body and one's property and one's money transfers over, keeps on moving into the action of running a business. So on a practical viewpoint, regulations cost you and I trillions of dollars a year. Every day we're paying for them. But on a philosophical, on a fundamental, principled level, they also violate the rights of those who want to go into business and those who want to work for businesses. And they need to end right now. Thanks.